Thanks.
Next.
Okay, so level 1 really in most people is choreography. Like when you learn from somebody, usually like level 1 is you go and you practice the form and learn the form until you can do the form without thinking about the form. Because as soon as your mind becomes free of what move becomes next, your mind can start to work on things like, where's my spine, where's my tailbone, right? And the idea, like why Tai Chi takes so long, I mean in any method it takes a long time, but why it takes so long is because you need to get to the place where something becomes so natural you don't have to think about it, and then you add a level of detail, right? And I know I'm kind of bad that way because I add too much detail, but you know. So level 1 is generally just choreography, maybe learning how to stand tall like the monkey. Then you're in level 2. Level 2 essentially means now you have a form to work with, which might be an entire form or not. Doesn't really matter, I don't think. Because if you look at Ilu, if you look at the entire Chen form, it's the same principles over and over and over with more and more difficult movements to do them in. So like the first 13, the first section, it's easier to do those moves with the right principles than it is to do the very last 13 moves with those principles, because it gets kind of crazy, right? Okay, so then level 2, you start working on Dantian moves first, and the 6 harmonies follow. Those are the next big things, which you already know this stuff, but good to put it on video anyway, right? So Dantian, not as the magical ball of super laser energy. No, I wish it was. Come on! But it being the center of mass of your body and your torso. So if muscular contraction begins there, it'll cascade outwards. This is what you want, so that you're actually using muscle chain reactions. So the idea of Dantian moves and then the hips move, that's the chain reaction going through your psoas and things like that to start the hip motion, and then it'll go up to the shoulders. 6 harmonies, yeah, up to the shoulders, right? So you're gonna have different bands of muscle going up the spine. We'll talk about spine in a sec. And from there, the movement gets amplified as it cascades. Knees and elbows should move together. Wrists and ankles should move together. Right? I can't believe you're even writing all this down. You know all this stuff.
Just write down anyways.
Yeah, right, fair enough. So once you've got, that's origin point of movement training. Right? So now you've got structure, or posture actually. You've got posture, standing tall like the monkey. You've got a choreography to work on, like to work these things in, and then you work Dantian moves first, 6 harmonies follows, until that starts to sort of work, right? Then the next big things are, before we turn the camera on, which is, basically you can kind of cut Tai Chi down into yin yang, big surprise. But there's so many ways to do that. So the first one is positive and negative circles. So positive circle is the one that comes in from the bottom and out from the top. And this is just labeling things, right?
Positive.
This is the positive circle, yeah. Yeah. Shun, is that what it is in Chinese? And then Ni is the negative circle. So I mean, one way to think about it is positive circles go thumbs up. Negative circles go thumbs down. Right? So negative circles comes in from my upper body and goes out from my lower body. So it's thumbs down. Positive is thumbs up. And they're actually Ni and Shun is the names of them. Shun is positive, Ni is negative. And those are actually Chinese medical terms that actually mean flow and counterflow, if you care. So there's rules for each of these. And if you look at Tai Chi like a big list of rules for your body, that's what makes it easier to be good, I think, because it allows you to just lay rules onto yourself while you train. And you can't lay them all on at once because it's too much. So wherever you are, you know, once you can do a form or any part of a form without really thinking about it, then you lay one rule, like standing tall like the monkey could be a rule. Once that's natural, Dantian moves first could be a rule, right? So positive and negative circles is there's a few rules for these. You ready? He's writing furiously. Turning pages and everything. So positive circles, so that's this one. So the wrist must remain higher than your elbow at all times. So it never dips below like this. So sometimes you'll see people when they're training and their positive circles will come down. And this is just like, this starts to become stylistic differences too, right? But that's our rule. So the wrist never goes lower than the elbow. The elbow must always be closer to your torso than your wrist. So that means I can never do this, right? With my elbow flaring out, my wrist flaring in. So my wrist is always higher, my elbow is always closer as I'm doing this stuff. Okay? Never higher than your eyebrow. Yeah, your hand never higher than your eyebrow, and never lower than your knee. Now the lower than your knee part is in the negative circle, right? Because you can't get your wrist, ideally you're not going to be able to get your wrist below your knee in a positive. Unless you're either screwing it up or way too low.
Oh shit.
Okay, so wrist above the elbow closer to the torso, higher than the eyebrow. Never see the palm of your hand. So when you're coming in, like in lazy about tying coat, this is a common issue, is that people will look at the palms of their hands, okay? And I mean, the reason for that is that it's harder to structure here than it is here. Just changes the muscularity. Not that this is impossible. You look at Yang style Tai Chi, you do this all the time, right? It's just a little bit easier and we're lazy, so why do it the hard way? It's hard enough. So in a negative circle, the same rules apply for many things. The elbow must remain closer to the body than the hand. Okay, so I'm never doing a negative circle like this with my elbow flared out. I'm always closer to my body than my hand or my wrist. But my wrist does go below my elbow during a negative circle.
Okay.
Right? Because like when I do this, I mean I'm down here, right? My elbow's higher than my wrist. Okay. But still, never see the palm of the hand. Okay. And this is where you see never higher than your eyebrow and never lower than your knee, right? Because you could go lower than your knee in a negative circle. And again, that's just structure stuff. There's one other rule. Have you caught up there? Sort of, right? Mm-hmm. One other rule is do not cross the center line of the body.
For both.
Yeah. So that's referring to when I come in to my body here, right? So I'll do a negative, right? So if I obey these other rules, it's very easy. So my center line's right here. I'll put my hand on it. It's very easy to do this. This is the mistake, okay? As soon as your wrist crosses your center line, muscles start to disengage in your shoulder. So I'm actually way weaker here pushing forward than I am here pushing forward. It's easy to test on somebody. So always to the center line, but no further. And it means your wrist, okay? It doesn't actually mean like your fingertips or something, it means here. This one generally actually gets kind of contested sometimes, because if you watch people do the set, you'll see this, and it looks like this is crossing, but it's because my torso's turning the whole time, right? If I left my torso there, then yeah, it would cross, but if my torso stays in the same relationship.
So it doesn't cross your center line.
Exactly. Not your mother line, right? Your center line, the one on the front of the body. And it's the same positive and negative. Those are kind of the steadfast rules. And the entire style can be looked at as positive and negative circles, right? Because it's a yin-yang interchange. Either your hand is spiraling this way or your hand is spiraling this way. So if you look at like a normal punch, it's a negative circle. So you can actually apply these rules just to anything, like even a jab or something, right? If I start jabbing like this, I don't have the same force as if my elbow's closer to my body than my hand, right? It's fairly simple, really, but the way the Taiji form's created, the way it was built, there's a lot of ways to screw up. On purpose, I'm sure of it. So, and that's the idea, right? The progression through the form just keeps getting more and more tricky, so you have to really watch what's going on. And this is yet another rule, right? Is you could spend months if you wanted to, just on those things. And you can apply these rules across the board on your martial arts. Because why wouldn't you? They're all about power and efficiency and stuff, right?
10 minutes.
Yeah, you can pause that.
Okay, so some Xingyi Liuhe specifically. So I'm here. This is actually the rec center in Creston, BC, where I live and teach. Had a Qigong class this morning. Anyway, thought I would do a quick little vid while I had some flat ground. So in Xingyi Liuhe, there's a couple of things, there's a lot of things actually that are kind of odd and different as far as other martial arts. And one of them, of course, is that forms are generally learned last, and movements are generally learned individually and then linked together before you get to forms. But even more fundamental than that is that it's kind of like Lego. All your stepping and stance work are kind of learned independently of all of your arm work. So like in my last video, right, I did like tiger looks down the mountain, and I did iron bar, for instance. Well, iron bar, if I take that as my example, the iron bar technique involves my leg, obviously, and my arm to create the 6 harmonies, but it's sort of cut in the middle. I can put any step underneath iron bar, or I can put any hand movement on top of that step. So I thought I'd do a video for you guys just on steps and stances. So the one that we've covered already for iron bar is called wind sweeps of cobblestones. So I'm going to take my arms completely out of the situation here. So wind sweeps of cobblestones, what I'm doing is I'm just turning my foot sideways as I take my step and skipping along the ground. Now when I hit the ground with my heel, I want it to be ahead of my foot. A lot of people, when they're doing this, they kick right beside, but really what that's simulating is the hit on their ankle or on their shin bone, right? So I want it to be out there. That little noise happens ahead of my own foot. So if I just do it, I'll use this line in the concrete here. I'll step through, and then I'll chase. I'm not going to use hands. Now I'll step through, and I'll chase. So that's the wind sweeps the cobblestones. So everything's the same as in iron bar. I'm still turning my body flat, all that kind of good stuff. But I'm isolating this idea so that I can get any step to work with any other step in any other hand position. So wind sweeps the cobblestones. The second one is the most popular one in Xingyi Quan, okay, which is something called post stepping, or drag stepping, or follow stepping, or three-legged stepping. And it's the one that you see when people do Xingyi Quan, where they'll do their 5-element technique, and then their rear leg will drag into place. Okay? Same. This follow step in Xingyi Liuhe is like identical because they're related, right? So the biggest trick here is in the follow step, take my hands out, is that I do an overreach here, this is my chase, and then my weight, which doesn't change back here, is dragged. So the way to do this wrong is that you do your chasing step, and you bring all your weight forward, drag your weight back, and then place it here. This isn't right. You want to make sure that it's like you're sitting on a bar stool that has casters underneath it. So I'm just dragging my entire weight underneath there. So my body stays straight, okay, but I'm not doing this. You're not going to see my body do that, okay? So when you're practicing this one, this is the thing to be able to be good at. And not just doing it one-sided like I am here as the demo. You step. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's dragging step, following step, posting step, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, we'll go on to another step from there. So now we've got wind sweeps, wind chases the moon, or dragon stepping. Now dragon stepping, I'm only going to do part of it because it's actually really complicated. A dragon step is built out of the step here from Tiger Looks Down the Mountain. So you can see I'm almost in a bow stance, like a Kung Fu bow stance, right? But instead of this, with a wide berth, everything's narrowed. So my heels line up in the stance. This is like a bow step, but everything's narrowed, okay? We'll get into that in another vid about wedges. I want to be as narrow as I can. So when I step in, this generally has a follow step into this stance, just so you know. Now, the dragon step is the same movement, but instead of here, so you see my right arm and my right leg, right? Or my left arm and my left leg. I actually turn this whole system around. Left arm, left leg, and turn here. So this really opens your waist, big time. So when you're doing dragon stepping, or wind chases the moon, I'm doing a following step, and I'm trying to get my wedge to be as clean and as linear as possible, even though I change the top. So you see when I'm doing it here, if I really slow it down, this should be close to identical here, as I can be, right? And that all depends on waist flexibility and stuff. Okay? So dragon stepping comes from there. That's only the first part of it. The other one that's really, really important in this one is running step. Running step's used a lot when you're fighting. So running step, basically if I took a horse and I rotated this in, okay? Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to get everything lined up again, because I'm looking at that wedge, so on this line, I want this wedge to be coming right out through my body, no matter what happens up top. Now a running step is never done straight. So if I use this line as my guide, I'm not going to walk straight towards you. I'm always moving from side to side. And the weight transfers into the lead leg every time. And I release, transfer to the lead leg. And you can see why it's called a run, right? Because I'm actually running at my opponent, almost leaping in. And this one is really useful for covering distance. Not just in the case of somebody who's running away, but somebody's been hit. If you hit somebody with Xingyi, they'll generally fly out. So you have to chase them down to get the rest of it off. So I want to have a line, heel off the ground, a line through my lower bone, out my knee, into the other shin bone. Okay? And the line from my lower foot into my lead heel. If that's all put together, maybe it's got a seat there. If that's all put together, once I put a line on the top, anybody can kind of push on me, and I'll have lots of power because my whole body will be integrated for that. So that covers the basics. So this is like Lego blocks. Now you've got all your big foundation blocks, and you can start to run anything over top of it. So if you've already got your iron bar, Tiger looks down the mountain, and anything else you might have picked up, I think I did a couple of monkey moves and ox moves already. Start running them all on top of all of these steps. Cool, thanks.